Celeste. Celeste is a really famous game, and I don't think I really need to explain too much about it. But for those of you who don't know exactly what I'm talking about, Celeste is a 2D platformer. It's definitely hard, but not incredibly hard. It does a good job at teaching you how to play it. And it has a really good reputation for speedruns. So this week I'm gonna try and do a speedrun of it. This is a week to speedrun Celeste. I'm gonna try to do an any percent run, which basically means reaching the end credits as fast as possible. Anything goes, you can do everything. What I'm gonna do is play every chapter, almost every chapter actually, till chapter 7. There is more to it than this. This game has a lot of playable content. You can play chapter 8 and 9, which you unlock after you finish the game. You can also play the B-sides and C-sides of every chapter, which are other versions of them. I'm not gonna bother with any of this. I could play a couple of B-sides, because they are actually faster, but that's definitely something I should try to do only when I get really good at the game. I was lucky enough to have Plush by my side. He is an incredibly talented speedrunner and he was so kind to help me out. This game doesn't have that many movement options at first. What you can do is jump, dash and climb walls. There is also a stamina system, which means you cannot climb walls indefinitely. But there is much more than that, trust me. Because if you chain certain movements, you can do so much more. You can hyper dash, you can wall bounce, you can spike jump, you can do so many things that we are gonna see in this episode. At first what I could do was wall bounces and hyper dashes. The first day Plush wanted to see exactly what I could do, so I streamed the game for him. I showed him exactly where my level was, and we decided to play the first chapter. And kind of obvious choice. He helped me out with the route. We came up with a couple of setups and route options that were good for me, because I cannot do everything that the world record does. That would be really incredible. Okay, here. Now, to get to the spring, it's kinda, whatever I do is kinda weird. Like, there's no, it seems like there's no option that covers exactly that distance.
There definitely is, dude.
Yeah, I guess there is, but what I mean is I've yet to find it basically, because either I could maybe just dash and then jump, and
Yeah,
I
you can
guess
just,
it could work.
no, like even easier, you just jump and then dash, right?
Okay, so do I just neutral jump or I jump towards the spring? Well, I
Okay.
can try both. Okay, seems like
Yeah.
jumping towards it. Okay,
You could
so
also like dash right instead of upright if you want. Like, it's not
okay.
hard at all.
You know, this is something I know I will have to ingrain in my muscle memory, because basically I always jump in the, I always dash in a diagonal.
Yeah, that's actually not good.
There is especially a shortcut at the end of the chapter that is really difficult, and I opted to not try to do it. The second day, Lash said something really important to me. In his opinion, it's really beneficial to practice chapter 1 and chapter 3, because they can help you a lot in learning the game. Chapter 1 for the basics, and chapter 3 I don't really know why, but I can get it. Chapter 3 has so many moving obstacles. It's really tricky. You need to learn how to avoid them, what cycle is optimal and stuff like that. Which, spoiler, it is not something that I did. I didn't have enough time in 1 week to learn exactly everything. So I learned the general route of the game and I practiced to be able to just complete a round. But yeah, we did a lot of practice on chapter 3. It was frustrating, trust me. There is also an infamous skip in chapter 3, which you can perform by doing a demo dash. A demo dash is a dash in which you press down at first and then you change direction. And what happens is, you dash, but the hitbox of Madeline is shorter because it is basically the hitbox of Madeline crouching, which allows you to pass through certain geometries in the game, because not everything that looks solid in the game is actually solid, but a lot of obstacles are made of various objects that don't touch each other, so you can pass through certain gaps. The third day was the last day in which I practiced with the help of Plush, because I decided I didn't want to waste so much of his time, and also I thought it was time to practice alone. So, for our last day of practice together, I continued with chapter 1 and chapter 3, because as Plush said before, they are really important to learn the game. I still was really bad at them, but I did my best, really, I really tried to do my best. And this is where I really started to understand how much you need to memorize stuff in this game. There are so many rooms, so many things you need to do. You go so fast, you cannot really react when you change a room. You need to know in advance what you're gonna do. After my call with Plush, I decided to start my own practice, and I started from chapter 7. I decided to do this because if you remember from my last episodes, I always try to practice the last portion of a game first. I don't know if this really helps, but I think it might, because when you get into a run you get nervous, it's normal, and if you know that you have practiced the last part enough, it really helps. It really helps with your nerves, it really helps with your self-confidence. The 4th, 5th and 6th day were all really similar to one another. I practiced 1 or 2 chapters every day. There are a couple of things that I want to show you. In chapter 7 there is a skip which is really cool. It is a spike jump, which is not something I'm usually capable of doing. Basically what happens is, if there is a wall with spikes on them, of course if you go into the spikes you're gonna die. That's normal, that's a normal mechanic of the game. If you go into the spikes in the opposite direction, you don't die, you don't take damage. And you can see this in other parts of the game. What's really tricky here is, if your movement is just right, you can approach a wall from the opposite side of the spikes, go into the spikes a little bit, and then press jump to jump from the wall. There is a setup in chapter 7 to be able to do that. It skips an old section that you need to go through in order to be able to get to a key. And it's pretty useful, and it's really cool to do, and it's not that difficult. In chapter 6 was so difficult, and still is for me, because of the feather mechanic. I use a controller to play this game, which is something that I should mention. I use a Pro controller for the Switch, which is not the best option out there. It is the only one I have available, unless I want to play with keyboard, which I really am bad at, so I'm not gonna do that. The D-pad in the Pro controller is not great, especially for dashing. It can be frustrating, but you can get used to it. The problem with chapter 6 is I was stubborn. I wanted to control the feather using the D-pad, which is really difficult. To have an analog stick, use it, really. It's so much easier. It is still tough. It is still one of the things that I struggle with the most in this game, but it really changes everything. In chapter 6 there are a couple of skips you can do. One is leg skip, I'm not going for that. it's too difficult to me. There is another one that I can do, and it's similar to the skip in chapter 1, but this one is way easier and requires you to do a neutral jump, which I'm not gonna go into details too much, but it is basically a way to be able to jump from a wall even if you don't have stamina anymore. Okay, chapter 5. Chapter 5 is interesting. It's really easy to get lost. It's kind of a maze. It is not incredibly confusing, but it is definitely the more confusing level. Chapter 5 is the chapter in which most people use the B-side because it is faster. I decided not to do that. Even Plush said to me that it wasn't a good idea at first. I will have to learn it eventually, but not right now. And because I decided to play the normal chapter 5, there is a skip that you are kinda required to do, because otherwise you need to do so much more. Which is a skip that I struggle with a bit, but I can do it. I think it requires a reverse hyper dash, I'm not sure. Because basically what you need to do is do an hyper dash, which I didn't explain too much before, is basically a way to extend your dash by doing also a jump. It's not too difficult to do, but it's kinda difficult to explain. What you need to know is that you can cover a lot of distance using it, and that's fine. That's what it's used for. It is also pretty fast. And you can skip a normal section, skip acquiring a couple of keys, and a lot of stuff if you can clear a certain gap. But it is not that easy. Chapter 4 is definitely an hard chapter for me. The wind mechanic is really difficult to get accustomed to because the wind always blows at a different speed and different direction from room to room. It is not really easy. And it is a forgiving chapter, I would say. It is not like you need to pay attention to cycles too much or stuff like that, usually. But it is still a pretty difficult chapter to me. There is nothing that comes to mind when regarding particular skips or stuff like that. Chapter 3, I talked about it before. There is the skip with the demo dash, which is pretty cool. You need to pay attention to a lot of cycles and a lot of moving objects. The final fight against Oshiro, it is not really difficult per se, but knowing that dying against him can lose you so much time, and that you cannot really stop for a second to understand what you're doing. You need to go, otherwise you can die pretty easily. It can be tricky for sure. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is not too difficult. There is maybe one weird mechanic that you can abuse, and I never been able to do this, which is the way the game positions you after a cutscene can be slightly abused here, but it saves at most a couple of seconds, and I was never able to get it, so I didn't go for it. There is a section on this chapter that is always really tricky to me, and I guess I should practice it a lot more. But apart from that, pretty smooth sailing. I'm not fast, I do mistakes, but this chapter is definitely one of the easiest for me. Chapter 1 is the first chapter I practiced with Plush, and I ended practicing it a little bit more. Like chapter 2 is a pretty straightforward chapter, and there are things that you can do to try to make it faster, and I try to do some of those things. Again, all these movement options I've talked about before. But yet again, the only really skip that you can do, which is at the end of the chapter, I'm definitely not good at it, and I decided that I would not go for it on the 7th day, the day of my run. And so the last day came. I knew that I didn't practice that much. I basically practiced every chapter for 1 or 2 days, and I didn't memorize throughout that well. So I had to rely on instincts. And so I did. I started the run. It wasn't the best, of course, but I was pretty happy with what I was able to do. The more time passed, the more I felt tired, of course, because this ended up being a really long run. In chapter 3 I was really surprised of getting the demo dash first try. During the first few chapters I was able to hold the run together, even though it wasn't really incredibly smooth, until I got to chapter 6. Chapter 6 was nightmarish. It was so difficult for me to continue. I was tired because of the previous chapters, and as I said before, this is definitely the hardest chapter for me. At some point I started to treat this more as a practice than as a run. I still wanted to finish the run, but I felt like why not take the chance and do some practice also. So after a long time I finally ended chapter 6. I was really tired, so much time had passed, but I was ready for chapter 7. Chapter 7 went pretty okay, I would say. I still lost a good amount of time because of the fatigue that I accumulated. But I pulled through and I finished the run. And it wasn't a good run by any means, but for only 1 week of practice I think I can be pretty satisfied. This game is so rewarding. First time I finished it I felt amazing. This time that I finished it in one single day, I felt so awesome. I didn't care that my time was really terrible, and it is. It's 2 hours 29 minutes. It is pretty terrible. I'm really far below in the leaderboard. But it felt great. It felt incredible. Trust me. You need to do this because this is one of the most satisfying feelings I've ever felt. And this has been a week to speedrun Celeste. If you're watching this video when it came out, you can go to twitch.tv/leolitz, Leolitz. I'm gonna stream this game. I'm gonna practice chapter 6. I'm gonna get good at it. Because I need to. I need to get good at this game. I really like to speedrun this game. And yeah, you can catch me there if you want. There is also another thing that I want to talk about with you before the end of the video. This episode in particular helped me understand one thing that I think it's really important for me. I decided to make this series of videos because I saw so many people struggling with starting speedrunning, or rather being a bit afraid of it, because it can be intimidating. You watch a stream of someone nailing frame perfect trick after frame perfect trick. It's incredible, it's amazing. How can he do it? How can I do it? It's impossible. I cannot do it. And this is what many think about when they think about speedrunning. That's not necessarily the case. And I want to show everyone that if you really want to, it doesn't take too much to start speedrunning any game, really. It's not that complicated. Sure, if you want a world record, it's gonna get tough, trust me. But if you just want to have fun and speedrun and talk with the community, do it. It's really that easy. But to show you exactly how easy it is to improve, 1 week is not enough. It is a good starting point, but it is not enough. So I decided that in the future I will do some recap videos. I will show you how much I improved in every game that I played for my previous videos. And I think that could be really useful and really fun too. So finally this is it. It took me so long, sorry, really. Next video will be a lot easier for me to film and edit, so it will probably be out really soon. So if you wanna see that, stay tuned, it's coming.